You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today, and today we have another show lined up for y'all. We have a special guest, Dain Dunston. He is the author of Being Essential, and he's the founding partner of Reservoir LLC. You can go to his website, daindunston.com. We're going to sit down with him and talk about everything that you need to know when it comes to his book, because I'm excited to know more about his history and more about his professional background. Because over 30 years, Mr. Dunston has been the go-to advisor for executive coaching for big powerhouses like GE, IBM, BMW, Pfizer, and many more. He's not just coaching performance, he's also guiding people towards purpose. And we're going to learn more about his company that he's a founding partner of, Reservoir LLC, all about his leadership and different resources that he provides through his brand. First and foremost, I just want to welcome him to the show and say thank you for your time for being on the show today. Dain, how you doing?
Doing great, Shamaya. Thank you so much for having me. It's great.
I know you have a ton more on your portfolio and what you do, but to kind of condense it a little bit for the sake of time, I'll give you the honors. Kind of tell us a little bit about what was the reason why you wanted to write the book, and what are some of the things that you are providing for your readers?
Yeah. So I spent a lot of years coaching executives and helping people figure out. And, I started out as a speechwriter and a speech coach. And so imagine being, on stage in an empty hotel ballroom, and they're sitting up seats for 2,000 or 3,000 people. And you got a leader next to you who is either looking to you for some help or is like, I don't need it, stay away, right? And I could work with both of them. I would stay away. Or somebody would walk up to me and say, hey, Dain, how am I doing? Help me do this better. Help me figure this out. What I learned pretty quickly, over the first 5 years I was doing this, was these guys, they didn't go very far. In most cases, they did not make it to the top seat. In many cases, they didn't last for very many years. They just were so afraid. And I figured that out. That's what it was. It wasn't that they were just arrogant or thought they were so important. All of that was just to hide their fear. The guy who was vulnerable said, hey, give me some help. I'm going to be standing in front of 3,000 people tomorrow. I got to look good. And what I discovered, it wasn't so much about what they were saying on stage. It was who they were being. That was what the presentation was. So presenting yourself. So through that time, some of those people asked me to coach them as an executive coach, what is sometimes called the CEO whisperer. And what you're really whispering in a situation like that is not like, hey, why don't you go try this? What you're whispering is, who are you being right now? Where's your head? Where's your heart? What's causing this behavior? So let's get that straight. So I sat down to take some of those ideas a few years ago. And at first I was going to call it Need to Know. It was a list of things that you needed to know as a leader. But as I refined the idea, I said, oh, no. It's not like a list of things. It's some questions. It's what are the questions you want to ask yourself when you step up onto that stage or you walk into your office? It's who you're being. So that's what I dove into. And I think if you think about it, what's the one question that we sort of all ask when we're little kids? However we word it, it's like, who do I want to be when I grow up? And usually as little kids, we have roles. So at one point when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a policeman. Right, I was living in Los Angeles. Something came in the mail. It was a card inviting people to try out to be motorcycle cops for the city of Los Angeles. And I ran into my mom and said, Mom, I want to do this. It didn't occur to me that at 6 or 7, I probably wasn't old enough to do that, but that's what I wanted to do. Interesting question would be, why? Was it a sense of, that's a powerful way to be a person? A sense of, oh, they help people? Or was it like, oh, you get to ride motorcycles? I don't know. At the time, I don't. But so when I sat down and started really getting into the book, I was starting with the question of, who am I being, right, in this moment? And I asked a lot of executives. I had a talk with the former head of UPS, the CEO, and we had a conversation. I said, when you, how important is it for you to be really alert to who you're being, to ask that question? And he said, holy cow, man. He said, when I start off, when I back my car out of the driveway, I'm in Atlanta. We're one of the biggest companies in Atlanta. Plenty of people would see me drive by and go, oh, that's, he says, if I'm looking angry, if I'm looking flustered, if I get aggressive in my driving, people are going to say, hey, something's going on there. He said, if I pull into the garage at headquarters and I look like I'm really pissed off as I'm walking through the garage, people feel that. And it makes them feel something different. He said, woe unto me if I get in the elevator and don't say hi to people. He says, I got to really know who I'm being as I'm walking through there. And the sense of who you're being is not, I'm being the chief executive, or I'm being really tall and walking really straight. You might want to do that to get your mind straight. But it's really like, I'm being open and clear and paying attention to people. These people work really hard for the company. They don't work for me. They work for our customers. Let me honor them with a hello, that I notice them and go through that. And that really started. So I added to that question the question of, what do I want? So if you think about it, asking who you're being, who am I being, asking that question changes who I'm being. It literally makes me stop and change who I'm being. I probably was heading down to the marketing department to grill somebody about why this ad campaign isn't working or something, right? But when I asked who I'm being, I said, well, that's not what I want. I don't want to be that. It changes who I'm being. And so the next question is, what do I want? Changing who I'm being changes what I want. So now I'm walking down to the marketing department to see how I can help. You know, what do we need more resources? What's going on? How did that happen? Not to make somebody wrong. You know, lots of ad campaigns, as we all know, don't work. So that's what I do. So the idea really is questioning themselves. So, but let me back it up to that kid who's saying, who do I want to be when I grow up? Because I start the book with an exercise, and I'll do it with you. So we can both do it, and I'll share. I call it the Essential Child exercise. Martin Ray from Stanford, who's for a long time has taught a course in creativity, calls it the highest goal. But it's a moment in childhood, probably many moments in childhood, where we had a moment of really sensing ourselves, feeling at one with the universe, feeling like total oneness and being in the right place at the right time. And we remember it because it was such a profound thing. We felt safe. We felt connected to everything around us. We loved what was around us. But the first time I remember that, I was 18 months old, living in a 2-up, 2-down apartment building on the edge of Dallas that had been military housing in World War II. My dad had been transferred there to work for an aluminum sales company. And I'm standing behind the building. There's a girl, older girl, maybe 5 or 6, holding her little sister baby on the steps. And I've got a piece of paper and a really sharp pencil. And I say, I know how to write. And she said, no, you don't. You're not even 2 years old. You don't know how to write. And I said, yes, I do. And I put the pencil through the paper and into the palm of my hand. But the shock was not the pain of the pencil in my hand. The shock was I knew how to write. I knew it with every fiber of who I was at 18 months old. I didn't even know what writing was, but it was there, you know? Did you ever have an experience like that?
Well, you say that, it made me think about in kindergarten. I remember in my music class, we had like exercises with the music teacher where we would sing as a group and, you know, nursery rhymes for the most part.
Yeah.
What was pretty interesting is that my teacher would have us gain these gold stars. Yeah. And after you had a certain quantity, she allowed you to choose your reward. And one of the rewards was to head over to the keyboards. So the music keyboards where you can change the instruments to drums, percussion, you know, saxophone, trumpet, brass, you know, all that. And when I saw the keyboard, I made it my focal point. That's going to be my end reward when I get these certain amount of stars. So I literally put myself in position to get these stars, and whatever had to be done, my end destination was to get to those that keyboard. And I love drums. At that moment, I was just glued to music, and ever since, it was like bug my parents. I want a keyboard. And I had one that had no batteries at home. And I just pretend I was playing it because I knew when I was going to school, I had a system. Get those stars, I get access to that keyboard.
Well, therein in that moment lies the myth that we then live by. And myth as in Joseph Campbell's way he talks about it, really, is the hero's journey. And so that was an element of your hero's journey. So one of the things is, there's a lot of research that shows that you were born as a genius. Almost all of us are. Literally, up till about 4 years old, we just have genius level, the way our brains work and do all of this stuff. From that point, it starts to decline slowly. By the time we're 20, about 10% of us have genius level. And by the time we're fully adults, 2%. But in that genius moment, I believe that we can return to that intelligence. I believe that you can return to that intelligence on the keyboard. I can return to that intelligence with the pencil. And that's pretty powerful. What if we could find that essential self, that is, go from that essential child to the essential self that we are inside now, and then open up to really be our best self. And I don't mean our best behavior. I mean, like literally actually radiant as a human being internally, in our thinking, in our relationships, in just our sense of who we are. I call it radical self-awareness. It's really being able to be in the moment and say, oh, let me take a big breath because I just felt some fear and some anxiety. Let me step back. All right, let's go ahead.
And what's funny is, just to kind of touch on that experience, was growing up, I was always shy, introvert. And people always say, oh, you're not, because they see me doing the show. And I'm like, well, I still have some of that in me, but I've learned to deal with it and just make things happen. So to that story was, you couldn't be shy to earn these stars. You had to, I guess, show leadership. You had to show that you were interested, active in the classroom, ask questions, because she rewarded these stars by different behaviors that you did. So if you were asking questions about music topic that she was teaching a class, or a song or lyrics, or, anything with musical terminology, when you exerting yourself to be active in the class. That was the only way that she was giving gold stars. So I had to strategize. Okay, I have to get beyond the shyness and have to do this beyond my comfort zone in order to receive what she's going to reward us with.
Isn't that awesome? Did you go on to a career in music? Did you carry that through in your life?
So the funny thing is I landed in media and radio, but prior to that, my long story short is I was in the jazz band in high school, and I didn't have to audition because I played the trumpet since the 5th grade, actually since the 4th grade. Yeah. And music was always something that became my thing. And after that class in kindergarten, sound was always my thing. So my dad, I would pay attention to his sound system. I would play with his equalizer. I play with the radio. I play with headphones and Walkmans. Most don't know what a Walkman is. Stuff like that is pretty interesting how just the passion for editing and production, feel like that stemmed from that experience in that classroom.
Well, so look at where you are today. I mean, it all just came through. Not everybody has such a direct path. You know, some people have to take different steps and different paths. And for me, I was looking for something, not just writing, but something bigger. What am I going to write about? What am I going to do? And so I took what in the 60s and 70s was called the Journey to the East. And I ended up running a yoga center in London for a number of years and doing writing from there. Came back to the States in Santa Fe, continued to do that in LA. Finally ended up here in Texas, in Houston. Some friends had offered me a job. It was in industrial security, taking care of big office parks and stuff like that. And that's okay. I mean, I could get into that. But it wasn't what I was meant to be doing. And it was one of those moments in life where I said, okay, I got to, let me work on this. So I really started doing a lot of writing, doing a lot of stuff. I thought maybe what I would be doing and getting a lot of stuff published. But I was getting it published for no money, you know, in art magazines and literary magazines and things like that. And a few things in car magazines. And I had read a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which is an amazing book on the subject of what is quality. How do we determine what is quality in our lives, in our work, and who we're being? And I thought, I got something to say about this. And I had just read an editorial about quality in the U.S. car world in the 1980s. It was cars that were being made then were pretty rough, not very good. So I thought, okay, I know how I'm going to write. So I wrote about how to think about quality. I called it How Chevrolet Lost Its Mojo, and how they went from being they built these cars that were like tanks. I mean, they were great. You know, when I was a little kid, we would sit in a 56 Chevy and pretend we were sailing a battleship, you know, and it just felt like that. And so now they were kind of junky. And I sent it off to a big car magazine, and I didn't hear anything. I didn't even get a rejection letter, nothing. But 2 months later, the phone rings. And there's a voice says, "Hi, my name is Don Runkle. I'm the chief engineer at General Motors. I want to talk to you about this article you wrote." And he said, "We've been trying to articulate this for 10 years. You did it in 10 pages. Can you turn this into a speech?" And Shemai, I literally, it was like I vaulted into the C-suite and stayed there ever since, because suddenly I found a way to take all the threads of all the things I'd been working on and help them figure out what words they wanted to say, what story they wanted to tell, and then stand next to them on the stage and help them figure out who they were going to be when they told that. And that's the lesson for all of us. As a parent, as a leader of an organization, as a broadcaster, as a coach, we all have to figure out who we want to be, find our essential self, and be it as much of the time as we can. And we're going to fall down. We're going to get mad. You know, I'm going to get caught in the dog's leashes and get pissed off because I'm about to fall over, but then, okay, I go, okay, I can be with that. Just be with who we are. So that's really what my writing is about, my work is about, just finding that essential self and make sure I stay there. And I do it as much for myself as anybody else, because who needs it more than me?
Once again, listen to Refocused Radio and watching this online, talking to our guest today, Dain Dunston, author of Being Essential. You can go to his website, daindunston.com. My next question I want to ask you is, you talked about what I want to be when I grow up. I had the same roller coaster, if you will, because, of course, I had a personal heart strings with the kindergarten experience with the music thing. But I got older, third grade, when that question was starting to be prompted by teachers, I automatically said fireman. I don't know what it was. I just had mad respect for firemen. I remember seeing fire trucks and stuff like that, and it's just something that came to mind. Totally not where I went down that path. And in middle school, I was like, well, I want to be a sniper. I want to have some kind of military experience, but I'm real reserved and quiet. I just want to be behind the scenes and be a sniper. That was my very specific
Interesting.
And then that didn't fall through. Long story short is I wanted to get into the Air Force. And I was like, I got all these random ideas, but I end up in media. But I had a brother who he served in the Navy, and I have a grandfather who was Marine. And it's like, it's funny how things end up mapping out, but I'm doing exactly what I was actually naturally drawn to, and that was the art of sound.
Well, so let me then proceed, because you talked about who you were being, what you wanted, which was what in that context was who you wanted to be. The next question that I use after that is, what wants to happen? With you, clearly, for whatever reason, military career didn't want to happen. What wanted to happen had been in you all that time, it looks like to me, with the keyboards and all of that stuff, to bring you to sitting in front of that microphone right now. That was what wanted to happen to you. And what wanted to happen to me was, I can write. And that one article, just on a whim, I wrote and sent off, boom. And when we can get tied into what wants to happen and understand that, that's a real gift. My next book is following that. How do we sense the presence? How do we sense the future that's around us? Where do we go to that? How do we find what's next for us? What's next for our society? How do we find what's best, what's right? What can we do that takes that essential child's self and projects it now into what's next, what's future, what's happening? And I think that's a fascinating question. How do you look at that? How do you look and see what trends are coming? What's happening in the world around you?
It's crazy because, the more I'm thinking about this conversation, the more memories start just popping in my head. Because when I was young, it still is to today, is I literally can have a photographic memory of the exact moment, knowing exactly where I was. I can see the space of the room, and I can see myself just times where I would listen, because my dad loved jazz music. I would listen for hours, jazz music. And here's the crazy part. I would literally spend hours playing with the EQ. And I would cut off the high frequencies and the low frequencies and the mid frequencies. And it would just zero it all the way down to negative, so it'll disappear. And for hours, I would just listen to what was the difference of the song, the track, the bass going away, the high end going away, making it sound dull, making it sound crisp, making it sound true. It was so interesting that I was doing that at such a young age. And exactly. is what I've been doing for the past 10 years of in my radio career, but not just radio career, producing and doing behind the scene production in all realms, but specifically in audio, mixing, mastering, and presentations.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? What a great story. And you had a sense of how it happened. I did. We don't always. So for people who are sitting there as you and I are talking, say, well, wait, what about me? I have no idea where I am. I hate what I'm doing. I've got this terrible job. How do I figure this out? So I think the question is to really, really start asking yourself a lot of questions. Sit down maybe every morning before you do everything, or your first cup of coffee or something, and just quietly just ask that question. Write a note to yourself. What's out there looking for me that wants to happen? If I can't figure out what's in here looking forward, then what's out there looking for me? And it's pretty interesting how ideas can come to us. There's a quote from Martin Buber, who was a famous philosopher. He says, "This is the eternal origin of art, that a human being confronts a form that wants to become a work through them." You did that. I was able to do that. But if you're listening and you haven't been able to find that yet, just keep sitting down and looking for it. Ask for, what's an idea that wants to manifest through me? And I guarantee you, do it enough, learn to quiet your mind, be really clear about who you're being when you ask it and what you want, and you will be surprised how fast that idea can come. It's kind of amazing the way this works. And it's not just me saying this. I mean, there's so much neuroscience about this. There's so much work that's being done about how these things happen. There's a great book by Elizabeth Gilbert called Big Magic. She wrote the novel Eat, Pray, Love, and very, very great novelist. And she talks about the idea that as writers and creative people, there are ideas out there looking for someone to take them on. And I mean, she really says this is in terms of the consciousness of the universe, the consciousness of all creation. There are ideas that want to happen. If you ask for it, they will come to you and have a little chat with you, and you'll figure out if this is the right idea for you, and you'll go for it. And if you go for it and then something makes you stop, very often that idea will leave you. It's just amazing. So look at whatever it is that you want to do, even if you have no idea, and start sitting down and asking, okay, wait a minute. Who am I being? All right, I'm being that I don't like where I am. What do I want? I want to find who I really need to be to move on to the next thing and really find my essential self in life. And then ask for that to come to you. Ask what wants to happen and just keep looking until it does. It's pretty. So I'll give you an example. Father's Day on Sunday, right? I was thinking about my father and my grandfather. My grandfather grew up in the late 1800s. I mean, he was turn of the 20th century. He was probably 17. Lived in Buffalo, New York. And Buffalo was a rockin' town at that point. It was like one of the biggest towns in the U.S. It was called the City of Light. There was all this industry. It was the perfect place to be coming out of high school to go get a degree, go to college and become an engineer or a scientist or a salesman or businessman. No. He looked around and said, what's happening to our forests? They're cutting down all the trees. They're making all this stuff. What's going to happen to the forests? And it turned out that he wasn't the only person asking that. Vice President at the time, Teddy Roosevelt, was asking that, and other people were asking that. Down in North Carolina, the very first college for forestry was established and it was called the Biltmore Forest School, 2 years before he got out of high school. So he applied, and he was in he was accepted in the 4th class of forestry in the history of the United States. When he graduated in 1905, it was 4 months after the U.S. Forest Service was formed, and he was in the 1st class of students to get pulled in there. So I'm thinking, I would love to ask him what his childhood moment was, looking at and having that essential child moment, because he saw that and was pulled. He finished his career and retired as the head of the Forest Service in Northern California. And it's just seeing that thing that nobody else was looking at. There was a future that was there that nobody else, or not nobody else, but most people couldn't see. My father grew up in San Francisco during the Depression, and then World War II started. And San Francisco, as you know, was the big hub of the Navy for the Pacific War in the Pacific. He was 2 years in the Navy and then went to college at Berkeley. His dad insisted that he get a degree in engineering. God knows why, because his father had done this completely innovative thing himself. Dad gets a degree in engineering, hates every minute of it, but there was something happened that most people weren't seeing. Aluminum had come in to manufacturing because they needed it for all the planes that were being built. So now here are all these war planes being built in the war. Now the war's over. And what are you going to do with all the aluminum? So companies are looking for ways to do it. He saw that aluminum could be a really interesting thing to be involved in. The same as when people my age said, oh man, you know, computers would be an interesting thing to be involved in, or internet would be an interesting thing to be involved in. So he walked down the street from Berkeley to Kaiser Aluminum, took his degree, signed up, and spent the next 20 years, more than 20 years, on the fast track, going to big companies around the world, talking to them about how to build things with aluminum, and ended up being a CEO of an aluminum company by the time he was 45, and was just like, bam, this thing went. It took me a little longer to figure out, but I had to get the background stuff going. So we all have our journeys to make. The question is, who do we want to be on that journey, and who we are being will shape the journey.
One thing I want to add before we wrap up here is when it's a long story, I got to make it very short, so I'll make it very short. When I went through my schooling, my dad was hired with Chrysler in Michigan, so he worked just outside of Detroit. Okay. And me and my siblings got our education in Michigan because I'm born in San Antonio, but ended up being raised in Michigan because my dad's new job. Yeah. What's interesting is a series of events. So I remember when I was leaving kindergarten, getting ready to move to Michigan, I remember this one custodian in the lunchroom area, and they had their little back office. And I remember this guy was always nice. And I don't know why I prompted this question to my dad, but I was like, there's this custodian, I probably said janitor at my young age. Yeah. I said, can you share your barbecue with them? It was such a random thing, it was such a random question. Yeah. But I just felt I wanted to do something nice before we left to Michigan. And this guy just stood out as a very kind person. I wanted to do something nice for him. And my dad actually did it. One time we had barbecue and I got a plate to this guy. Yeah. It was like the Gold Stars mission, to get access to the keyboard. I had to get this Gold Star and get access to get to this guy. I got to give him a plate barbecue. Yeah. Long story short is I did it. I'll never forget the shock in his face. He said, wow, you did that for me? I said, I don't know what I said because I was too young, but I just the feeling of wanting to do something, and I did it. And I just felt like that carried with me throughout my years, from school, studying philosophy, to the show being birthed in the barbershop. I think the concept has always kind of been there. What is it for the other person on the other side? what was some of the things I can do. I feel like that just happened naturally. Everything I did, make my decisions based on, because before I even had my job in the media space I'm in right now, years before I even had the opportunity, I was listening to the station on the radio, not knowing that would be the very place that I'll end up starting my career. So it's so funny how a lot of things kind of just work out as you are pushing yourself to better yourself.
Well, that sounds like another essential child moment for you. And what's interesting to me about that is the first one was about the art of the technology that you were passionate about, the art of the music, but not just the music. It was the production and the playing and the stuff. But that wasn't enough. So you added the art of seeing people and letting people be seen. And look at what you're doing now. You know, bring a guy like me on. And the wonderful thing I was listening to a couple of weeks ago with the story of his grandmother's tree, the Native American. So, but bringing these stories and these people is like you're just shining a light on so many people. It's amazing. It's really great. Well, this has been a fun conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yes, I appreciate. This was a really good dialogue, and I feel what's so interesting about this is I didn't talk to you beforehand, so I did prepare for telling my childhood story. But I think it's very cool how things end up panning out the way they were always meant to be. And I feel like people always put, like you said earlier in the show, your heart and mind. Like you said with that executive who he realized through self-awareness, if I am aware of the moment I'm in and understanding people are watching. It's funny you said that because I'll keep it 20 seconds short. A guy who gave me a lot of wisdom and insight in radio broadcasting and being a host, who passed away not a few years back. He gave me some great advice, and he brought me on his show. I'm like, you talking about being seen?
Wow.
He gave me a chance to be heard.
Yeah.
All across Texas before I even had my official shot to even be a radio host. Yeah. That's goosebumps right there, because he saw something and he took the time to say what he said to me. And as a radio veteran, he gave me the opportunity to be on his show. He asked me if I would. So he saw something before it became something, because this is way before the thought of the barbershop. Yeah. This is fundamentally pivotal, shifting me into a space that I never even could have put on my bingo card. So being seen is a powerful thing.
It's so funny that you say that, because one of the things I say so often to people is what matters most to anybody who's working for you. If you're a leader, the greatest skill you can have is letting people know that you see them, that they feel seen. Because you do that to me, then I just want to be seen that way continually by you and by other people. So I'll live into that if you just give me that. It's so powerful. That's really, really great, Shemaiah. What a great story.
Appreciate you. You felt like you interviewed me at the same time. So again, for our audience, make sure you go to Dain Dunston's website, DainDunston.com, and get a copy of his book, Being Essential, and learn about all of what he does with his brand, being a founding partner of Reservoir LLC. And like I always want to say to you, Dain, and like we do to our guests, man, thank you for your time this morning.
Well, thank you. This is really fun. Enjoyed it.